You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, welcome back to the podcast. You are listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. And you've tuned in to episode number 468 of the show. Today, I've got an interview with a bloke I heard on the radio one morning. He mentioned that he ran a hostel on the Appalachian Trail, and naturally, my interest was piqued. I managed to track him down, and he's here today. His name is David Kibiloski, or Texas, and David runs the Stumble Inn hostel in Front Royal. He's got a very layered story that unfolds through our interview. At the end, we even get into a mini competition for listeners, so make sure that you listen to the end. David will be on shortly. After David, we've got another chapter from Emily Lennon's book, Happy Hiking. Funnily enough, having made the decision to make this the last book I'll be reading on the show for the foreseeable future, I had a few listeners reach out specifically to thank me for reading a book on the AT from a woman's perspective. I'm so glad I did that, and who knows, perhaps I'll bring this section back on the show and read another woman's book. Actually, one of my favourite AT books, and one that really got me hooked on the idea of an AT thru-hike, was Julia Urbanski's Between a Rock and a White Blaze. If you haven't read it, I can highly recommend it. But be prepared for wanting to hike the Appalachian Trail immediately after you finished it. I've also got a bit of news myself this week, but I'll save that until we hear from David. But before we get on to our interview with David, I want to share a short story with you all. And forgive me if some of you may have heard this before. A couple of years ago, one of my listeners to this podcast sent me this extraordinary map commemorating my Appalachian Trail thru hikes. The map had several customizable parts. There was my finishing photo, my dates, dozens of pictures of my hike, and a record of exactly where I was every single day I was out there. And then, almost as a throwaway line, the bloke who puts these maps together asked, "Do you want to put a saying or a phrase that you use on the map?" I couldn't think of anything immediately, but I suddenly recalled hiking with a friend a few years back who was struggling up yet another mountain in the Smokies. And I remember saying to him, "Look behind you at all those mountains we've crossed in the last couple of days. You didn't think you'd get over them, did you?" And I went on to say, "There has never been a mountain I couldn't get over." So, that was my phrase for the map. And I look at it every single day because I truly believe it. Chris at TSX Challenge asked me to share that story with you all. I stuck with him, probably because I told that story while sitting with him and all of Team 6 around the camp that evening after we summited Mount Whitney together. It was my fourth attempt to get there. Until that day, I kind of felt that phrase wasn't true for me, but I just proved to myself that it was. And, on reflection, whether on the trail or in life, I know it's true. There isn't a mountain that you or I can't get over. Sometimes we just need a little bit of help or a reminder. I'm getting a real kick out of personalising these ads for TSX. Hope you like them too, and to be honest, I love to do this sort of thing for all ads I get the chance to do. But now let's meet this week's main guest. Here is David Kibiloski of Texas. Our guest today is somebody I actually heard on the radio. No, he wasn't seen in a band. I was listening to the Michael Smirconish show on Sirius XM one morning a couple of months back when I heard a guy named David Kibiloski who told Smirconish that he ran a hostel for AT hikers called the Stumble Inn. Naturally, I found out where the Stumble Inn was. I called him, invited him on the show, and here he is. Hey, David, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Steve, great to be here. Thank you very much.
Now, there are a bunch of diverse things within your story we want to tell. So, we'll work out the order as we go along, I guess. But let's start with your own hiking. Has this been something you've been doing since childhood?
Well, I've been quite active. Growing up in West Texas, most of our recreation was outdoor activity. But as far as something like an AT thru-hike, not really. I had, in my adult life, I had done the Tour de Mont Blanc a couple of times.
Enjoy that?
Absolutely.
You did it. You did it a couple of times, did you?
I did a couple of times because I loved it so much.
Nice.
The idea of hiking from France into Italy, into Switzerland, back to France, all about 110 miles, and enjoying some fabulous, food and the different cultures, and then just awesome people along the trail. I highly recommend.
Not quite like the AT then.
Plenty
Plenty of awesome people, but an entirely different style
very
of
different.
living.
As was Kilimanjaro, which I guess I do things twice because I'm a slow learner. But again, anybody thinking about a Kilimanjaro trip, give it a go. It's awesome, and it doesn't take superhuman strength to reach that summit.
It looks like it does. It's just all up. There's no relief, is there, all the way up there?
No, every step is generally up. It's kind of like entering the Smokies for about 10 days in a row. Yeah.
Oh no. Yeah. I got to tell you, man, you certainly haven't sold it for me.
Okay.
And I know that you attempted an AT thru-hike in 2018 with Danielle, your girlfriend at the time, now your wife. How did that come about?
Well, her dad had thru-hike back in, I think, 2001, and then successfully sectioned it about 8 years later. So it was in her blood, and it was the thing on her bucket list. It's just one hash mark, hike the AT thru-hike. I had obviously heard about the Appalachian Trail, obviously Bill Bryson's book, and I saw the movie and whatnot. But the idea
Shocking movie, terrible movie.
The movie was horrible. The book was hilarious, but it's not a beginner's guide to hiking the AT.
No. And to be fair, it doesn't set out to be either.
And Bill's writing, especially his stuff that he does based out of England, is just fall out of your seat funny. And
definitely.
So when we got together, the idea of, we both were attracted to each other because of our attraction to the outdoors. And she says, "Do you want to hike the AT with me?" And I didn't know what she was talking about.
Wow, that's a crazy thing to do when you've only just met somebody as well, isn't it, really?
Right. And I didn't know what AT meant, and she says, "Well, it's the Appalachian Trail." And I said, "That sounds like fun. When do you want to do it?" Thinking it would just be some sort of week-long endeavor. And the more I found out about it, it was daunting, but my goodness, it just sounded amazing. And, within 2.5 years of meeting each other, we set out on the trail back in,
And did you find the AT, because as you say, when you first talked about it, you thought it was about just a week's hike. Of course, it's nothing like that at all. Did you enjoy that life on the trail? Was that something that really appealed to you straight away?
It did. I had a lot of level 2 fun days though, where I laugh about it and think nostalgically about it now. But at the time, it was quite difficult. We flip-flopped. So we started in Glasgow, here in Southern Virginia. And
by the way, but that's not most people's normal starting place and finish place.
There was no rhyme or reason. There was no, don't read into it like, oh, where do they know that I don't know? They don't. They just decided, in conversations with Danielle, we wanted to hike with a lot of people eventually, but we wanted to begin the hike pretty much alone. And we did. We got that. We got about 3 weeks of very, very few people on the trail for a couple of reasons. One, nobody had made it that far north yet, the Nobos. Right. And two, a tremendous blizzard hit on day 5 of our hike. And, that really constrained, the miles per day. And it was pretty difficult stuff. But I really did enjoy that time on the trail. Yeah.
So what was the plan? The plan was to go from Glasgow to where? And to Qatar, all the way to Qatar, and then down to finish at Springer?
Actually, opposite. We went Glasgow south to Springer, and at a certain point, we hiked through the bubble.
You started running into the bubble, I presume, didn't you?
Yeah, we got to experience the bubble every day. So we were meeting just about everybody Nobo that year. So we actually expanded, I think, more so than many, how many people we met on the trail, and that was also a benefit. Really, a quick story. I met a guy. What was his name? Tight end, maybe. Something funny. He was a large gentleman from Austria, and we got along famously. And just for that one night, and just had a really good chat, talking about Europe, talking about some of the shows that he found appealing. Some woodworking show that was based out of Maine, which actually plays a part in this. Anyway, we lost track of him, and I didn't see him again until the morning that we summited Katahdin.
Oh, wow.
months later, and for him, about 70 pounds later.
Yes, it does that to you. Did you
It
lose weight?
does.
Did you lose weight on the trail?
Yeah, I started out at about 225, and when I finally came off the trail, I was 179.
No, it's quite substantial, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great diet. Yeah.
Now, I know that you didn't finish the trail, and that was Danielle actually did. But tell us how you got knocked off, because this actually started back before you went on the trail, and there's been another question when it comes after this as to why you actually started in the first place. So tell us what happened and got you off the trail.
Well, I'd been quite active running marathons and whatnot, and I had a nagging lower backache for about a year prior to stepping off in Glasgow. And I thought it was just overuse and it would come and go. So I wasn't too concerned about it. But as we progressed on the trail, certainly after we flipped back up, the pain became, for me, unmanageable with or without ibuprofen. Vitamin I wasn't doing it for me anymore.
What was doctors telling you at the time, though?
Not much, because I hadn't really seen one. Prior to the trail, I saw a physical therapist, and they thought it was, merely overuse, and I just needed to rest it, ice, do the normal things. And so I listened to them, and that's what I did. And it did provide some relief, but ultimately, nothing that I was doing on or off the trail was reducing the pain.
And was it getting worse as time went on?
It was. In fact, I came off the trail a couple of times after we passed Harper's Ferry to just kind of rest my back, hoping that I could come back and catch those miles. And, that was the plan. And I met back with Danielle in New York, and we hiked all the way up to the Massachusetts border. And I had a couple of pretty good falls, and it got to the point where I wasn't sleeping at all. It was keeping me up all night. And obviously, one thing that you can't do without on the trail is water and sleep. And I wasn't getting the sleep.
Right.
So I finally made the decision. Yeah.
Must have been a tough decision to make, especially as she was going to go on. And you were, how many miles had you done by then? You'd done all the way to Massachusetts, in fact, hadn't you?
Yeah, I had a few gaps before Massachusetts, but I guess it was hovering about 1,300 miles total hiking. But I knew there was still, many miles ahead and some very tough hiking ahead. And, I was used to pain, but I couldn't get rid of this pain. And it was more than just aggravating. It started to worry me. Right. And I was insistent with the doctors to be more aggressive in diagnosis. And long story short, I found out that I'd been hiking with stage 4 cancer.
Now, stage 4 is not a good number. So, what did that look like at the time? To that, when you hear cancer, that's a bad enough word anyway. But you hear stage 4, that's like it feels like an imminent death sentence most times, doesn't it? What were you feeling at the time? What were you thinking at the time?
Gee, Steve, you're bringing me back to a moment I'd rather forget, but it plays a part in my today.
Yeah,
I remember vividly. I had gone in and they'd done an MRI and found something obviously out of whack in my back. Sure. And there was some sort of growth, and they thought it was an infection.
Right.
And I was happy because I thought, well, an infection, that's something I know you can treat.
Sure.
And even the doctors were like, well, you really don't want that. It's really difficult to treat. But at that point I was, the C word hadn't really come up yet, but I had thought about it.
Of course.
And they did a biopsy, and I was leaving work on a Friday, and I got a call from the doctor's office say, hey, if you're not busy, could you come in right now?
Oh, that's not good.
No, so I kind of knew, and cut to the chase. I'm in the doctor's office, and she comes in, and she can't even get the words out of her mouth, and she starts crying. I mean, she'd been my doctor for 10 years. Huh. And I was trying to console her. I said, well, come on, what's wrong? I thought it was something with her. And she says, I'm sorry, but you've got stage 4 cancer, and the tracers look like it's coming from your bladder, and there's growths on your spine. And she goes, I don't know how to say this in any other way, but you need to get your affairs in order.
Wow.
Because this is not good news, and I won't sugarcoat it, because we established a really good rapport, And she was always a straight shooter with me.
Well, to be fair, bursting into tears was probably pretty much a good clue. So she wasn't sure going to cope with it right from the beginning.
And she probably could have walked right out, and I knew that I was up against it. But, modern medicine is amazing. And, I had some radiation, surgery, unbelievable amount of chemotherapy, and then immunotherapy. And, here I am rocking and rolling in 2025. So, Steve, it's not a death sentence for everybody. And
that's right.
For whatever reason, and I believe that the reason was I needed to do something else with my life.
Right.
And that's when a big change in my head occurred, and it continues to occur to this day.
So just as a bit of a rubber stamp on this, you were born where?
I was born in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
Now, those of us who've listened to the news over the years have heard these horror stories about the water at Camp Lejeune. Have they traced it directly back to that?
They have. In fact, the Veterans Administration has already paid for all of my doctor's bills. And right now they're considering how much pain and suffering cash will come my way. And I've got that money earmarked, whatever will come to a different cause. But my parents were, we were very modest means. I mean, my dad was junior enlisted at the time. I think he had just made sergeant in the Marine Corps and retired Master Gunnery Sergeant Marine Corps. But for the first year of my life, I lived on powdered formula and the good old Camp Lejeune water.
Oh my God!
Yeah, there you go.
We don't know what we don't know, do we? So
no, we don't.
But you're well now, so that's all good, obviously.
Absolutely.
So
thanks.
To go back to the trial a second, had you already decided, you and Danielle, that if one of you couldn't continue, the other one would continue, or did she consider coming home with you or not?
No, we had all those talks before stepping on.
Right.
And we had decided, hey, we looked at the attrition rate and we knew that about 70-75% don't make it as planned anyway. Maybe they go back and section it.
Sure.
So there was a better than even odd that one of us, or even both of us, would not make it.
Sure. So you decided whoever was still wanted to go on would go on.
And the other would support as they could, right.
And I know that you summited with her?
I did. So
that must have been horrendous because you were in pain, and you must have had the diagnosis by then?
I had not gotten the diagnosis.
Right. But you were still in pain, obviously, weren't you?
It was very painful, but I wouldn't miss it. So I got in the Jeep and I rendezvoused with her tramily up in Maine and supported them for a while.
Nice.
And then we summited Katahdin. I had to get a head start. I took off early in the morning, about an hour before
2 days earlier.
And I was thinking, I just hope I beat them up there. So and I hike I just water, a few snacks, and my sleeping bag because I knew it would be cold up there.
Sure.
And I wanted to catch photos and videos of them coming up. And it was a glorious, glorious, sunny, beautiful day. And I got great photos. And hey, funny story, coming down, I left early because I knew I need the extra time. Mm-hmm. And I do have a video of this, so this isn't just an old fish story. I'm coming through that boulder field right below the summit, about less than a half a mile from the summit.
Yeah.
And I looked up and I thought I saw what looked like a huge dog looking at me. And I realized that it was a baby bear. And moments later, the mama bear, on top of Katahdin, the mama bear came out. She saw me and backing up a little bit. On the way up to the top, I crushed my right shin against a rock, and the blood was flowing pretty freely under my long johns. And I thought, oh, great, here I am. There's no place to go. She's looking at me. I smell like blood. She's got a cub. This isn't good. And that's, and that's when she bluff charged me.
Oh, no.
So thinking, well, I got to get this on film because no one's going to believe it. So I caught her right after the bluff charge, backing off. Her and the baby took off. And when I got down to the ranger station, I said, hey, do you normally get bears on top of Katahdin? And they all looked at me and kind of laughed, said, no, they don't go up there. I said, well, this one did. And the best they could figure, I showed them the video and they're like, oh my goodness. They said the best they could figure was a male was chasing her and tried to separate her from her cub to put her into season again. But regardless, she she saw to leave me alone, and I was pretty happy. And
Nice.
I hadn't been that scared. I was afraid. I'll be perfectly honest. I was afraid for my life. It had been since maybe Iraq that I felt that kind of fear.
Wow.
And
Wow.
anyway, fun stories. Yeah.
Yeah, not the time, I'm sure. But you know
Yeah,
what?
so- yeah.
It must have been kind of bittersweet. I know it must have been great for you because your girlfriend was summiting Katahdin, but it must have felt really bittersweet for you, didn't it?
A little bit. I was so proud of her. This was much more a goal for her than it was for me.
All right, cool.
And even to this day, I acknowledge that I wanted it, but I didn't want it like she wanted it. There was nothing that was going to keep her from getting to Katahdin and summiting, and she did it. And it's just one of the most amazing things to see her standing on top of that sign with her trekking poles crossed above her head, tears running down her cheek. I'm getting emotional right now thinking about it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Really good stuff. Really good.
You know
stuff.
what? There's nothing wrong with being emotional at a thing like that. It's, we've all felt it when we get up there, and
everybody cries, Steve.
Yeah,
everybody cries
at some stage. Yeah. And
yeah.
Did you ever consider trying to fill in the miles the following year, or had your cancer sort of nixed any thought of that?
The following year was impossible. I went from hiking 20, 25 miles a day, and once the chemo hit, I couldn't walk around the block. So It was a long, process getting back to, the modicum of good shape.
Sure.
And I have gone back and finished quite a bit of Pennsylvania, and plans to go get the rest of those bits to include Massachusetts straight through to Katahdin, summiting again.
Would you say again? Yeah, good. Quite right.
Be
too.
a section hiker
Quite
and be proud of that. Yeah, got to do it. It's not done yet. Yeah.
And when we spoke the other day, you did refer to the best trail magic, but you never told me what it was. What is it? What was it?
Okay. This is one of those stories that sounds again like a fish story, but we were still southbound when we got to the Smokies, and our plan was to come down to Standing Bear, pick up a box, a resupply box, and then head to Davenport Gap, and then begin our begin our Smokies.
Yeah.
But when we got to Standing Bear, it was a tremendous thunderstorm, and we decided to stay there. They had a couple of slots left. So the next morning, we hiked the 17 and a half miles to Tri-Corner because Cosby Knob was closed because of bears. Oh. And then the next morning, we were talking over coffee, and I brought up, hey, we plan on zeroing in Gatlinburg. If we could get to Newfound Gap today, we could potentially double zero or invest that time later on, knowing that, injuries could happen, whatnot.
Sure.
So we took off, and Danielle had been having horrible pain in her left foot.
Right.
And it got to the point as we were getting within 7-8 miles of Newfound Gap where every water source we were having to stop, and she'd have to take her shoe off and wash, put it in the cold water. Her pinky toe looked like a big fat red raspberry.
The cold water always helps, though, doesn't it?
Always helps for a little bit.
Yeah.
So anybody who's hiked with a partner knows that it's okay to have a bad day. It's just not okay if you and your partner are both having bad days. And I wasn't having a bad day. I was having actually a pretty good day. It was, unlike many of the Nobos, we weren't suffering because of the cold. It was actually quite hot, to be honest with you. And I was telling Danielle things like, we'll get to Newfound Gap and we're going to find a nice couple there. I'll yogi us a ride. Oh, it won't be just any ordinary ride. It'll be in a brand new SUV with leather seats and cold air conditioning. And the guy's going to offer us cold beers to sip on our way to our hotel. And she's like, look, I couldn't get her to smile. She was in that much pain.
Yeah.
So we finally make it to Newfound Gap, and she hits the loo, and I'm standing out front, and there's a gentleman.
You called it the loo? You called it the loo? That's a British thing.
I'm speaking your language. I spent a couple of years in your country with the military.
Okay. The loo, perfect.
So the toilet, the restroom.
Yeah.
So I'm out waiting for her, and there's a gentleman standing there with a Ohio State University cap on, and I transitioned straight into Yogi the Bear mode, and kind of sidled up to him and, hey, you're an OSU fan, that's great, da da da, and we're chit chatting, and he's not taking the hint that we need to get to Gatlinburg because I haven't told him, hey, could you give us a ride to Gatlinburg? That's not true Yogi. Yogi is when they offer, right?
Yes.
And I'm thinking, well, this is I'm striking out. I'm just going to continue to chat with his mate. And when Danielle gets out here, she's pleasing to the eyes, very, very good looking woman. I'm very lucky. Better on the inside than out. She comes up and I'm thinking she'll seal the deal. She'll get this done. He's still not taking the bait. Well, then his wife comes out of the bathroom and all four of us are standing there and I'm watching all these cars heading down the mountain to Gatlinburg. And I finally say, hey, this has been a great conversation and I wish you guys well. I'm going to go stand on the corner here. We're trying to get to Gatlinburg and we're going to try and hitch a ride, but you guys are fantastic. And he looks at me and it just occurs to him. He goes, well, we're going through Gatlinburg right now.
There you go.
I said, you don't say. And he goes, yeah. And the wife's like, we got plenty of room. What? Come on, we'll take you all down there. We get to their brand new Volkswagen SUV with leather seats. No kidding, Steve, I'm not lying. We're getting into the car and into the SUV, throw our packs in the back, and there's a cooler there. He goes, I don't suppose you guys would like a cold beer. Oh. So my favorite picture of the trail, other than the summit with Danielle, was her sitting beside me with a 16-ounce can of Miller Lite with this big old grin on her face. And to this day, she thinks it was a whole setup, that I had already coordinated all of this beforehand. Nice. No, she didn't believe that. But that was amazing. And that was just one example of trail magic, but it's one that sticks in my mind. Yeah,
happens all the time, doesn't it? Yeah.
And we had just a wonderful 2 days in Gatlinburg. We touristed it up, funnel cakes, the whole 9 yards. We had a great time.
So you obviously got a lot out of the hike because it was clearly a big motivation for the stumble in. When did the two of you start talking about a hostel? And was it something that you'd thought of before you went out there, or was it your experience on the trail that made you think, a hostel may not be a bad idea?
100% on the trail. Never even really thought about hostels other than backpacking around Europe. We stayed at a number of really neat hostels. Highlighting, I guess, would be like Neville at Woods Hole and Tina at Quarterway Inn. I mean, they're just God's gift. And we started talking about maybe taking a month off and just donating our time and living at a hostel and just working there. Because I know they're always looking for help. And
caretakers every now and then as well.
Absolutely. And we enjoy the energy of hostels, especially in the afternoon, evening. Everybody's fed. We're sitting around a fire. It's just magic. And that progressed to, well, why can't we have our own hostel? And it seemed very foreign to me. I mean, I was deep into the coat and tie, DC life. And I thought, we'll put that on the back burner. How about maybe 2024? Far enough away that it didn't really feel real, right? But it still
and if you still wanted to do it then you would do it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Exactly. But along the way, we would stay at a hostel, and then as we hiked out, we would talk about things that they do really well that we would have to incorporate into whatever it is that we may someday. Of course, that was still 6 years off. Do ourselves.
I was thinking about that, because you as a hiker and me as a hiker and other people who listen to the show who are hikers, we kind of know when we go into a hostel, we know not so much what we expect, but what we would like to see there. Did you add, once you decided and you bought the place and you got it set up, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but did you bring into it things that you thought of you could have done with when you were out on the trail?
Absolutely. We borrowed freely from the good ideas of hostel owners up and down the trail. And most of them have been in place up until the end of last season. Sure. And, our idea was build the best of breed. And you don't do that by coming up with good ideas that don't really translate to what a hiker needs and wants.
That's right.
It's experiencing what a hiker really needs and what they really want. And we built, what ultimately became the Stumble Inn around that model.
So how did you find it? How did you find the Stumble Inn? I mean, literally find it. I mean, how we, you can say I want a hostel, but did you buy an existing hostel or did you buy something that you turned into a hostel?
We bought what would be our home that could be used as a hostel. And I remember this like it was yesterday, that 2-week first shutdown for COVID in March of 2020. We were having dinner and Danielle just looks up at me and she says, we ought to just do it now. And I have no idea what she's talking about. I said, do what? She goes, let's go get a hostel. Let's do this now. And I thought, yeah, let's do it. Of course, the whole cancer scare had completely reevaluated my mind. What's really important in life?
Sure.
And the idea of doing something like that was more than just appealing. It was almost as if I needed it. And so we began our search. We traveled down to North Carolina and looked all throughout the Brevard, Asheville area, that whole corridor, the Pisgah. It's beautiful country.
Sure.
I highly recommend hiking and staying there. Trout fishing is amazing. And then we also looked at Front Royal, Virginia, because we were very familiar with Front Royal. It was our stepping off point for many, many weekend hikes in the Shenandoahs. And we finally decided Front Royal, the one factor that led us to making that decision was the fact that it was on the Appalachian Trail. And we knew that we would be able to attract through hikers if we did it right. So we found what is now the Stumble Inn, a large cabin up in the mountains.
How close to the trail is it? How close to the trail is it?
We're about equidistance from two trailheads, each about 4.5 miles from.
You did shuttling and things like that to get people back to the inn.
Yeah, bought a big 15 passenger van, Big Blue, and that's what we used to pick up, drop off, town runs, the whole 9 yards, and it just kind of unraveled from there in a very good way.
And did you kept open all year round, because it wasn't just hikers? You saw bikers, cavers, paddlers, and so on, didn't you? Was it a business model that will keep you open most of the time?
No, in fact, our business model was purposely built around the beginning through the end of through hikers coming through. Although we will open our doors if we can, if we happen to be here in the area. But over the 4 years of Stumble Inn's existence, our plan and what we actually did was finish with the bubble would come through mid-May through the end of June, and then stragglers through July. And then we would close our doors sometime in early August-ish. Right. And then we would go out on adventures. I mean, this past year, we headed from here through the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We did the border route, some of the border route trail up along the Canadian border, shot across to Glacier National Park, down through Grand Tetons, through the Rockies. And it was just an amazing 2.5 month adventure. Now,
it's going to make people laugh, I think, but people are listening to this thinking, wow, that sounds great. This guy sounds great. I'd love to go and stay at this place. But you've closed it. You're closing for hikers as a hostel, aren't you?
Yeah, we made the decision after this last season for a couple of factors that we needed to reevaluate the business model, because, our goal was to help, our mission is to help today's hikers and to somehow enable kids to become hikers as well, or at least to enjoy the outdoors. And we were succeeding in the first part of that mission, but we were not succeeding in the other half. And that was very important to me. And so we've come up with a new model.
So tell us about first the AT Kids Foundation, which I know has been pretty much on your mind. You've been working with it since the start of Stumble In, I believe, or pretty much since you started, or you were at least thinking about it. What is the AT Kids Foundation, and how did that come about?
Well, it came about because we needed a mechanism to translate all the profits and every penny of donated money to a worthy cause that would get kids away from their screens and into the green. And AT Kids is that mechanism. And Stumble In is, in fact, a 501c3 nonprofit.
Right.
So there's a tremendous amount of oversight on how we use that money, which is fine by me, because I want all that money to go to another nonprofit that can execute the mission of getting kids out into nature.
And as you mentioned, that necessitated changing the business model as well. So this is the second part of AT Kids Foundation in many ways. It's what you plan to do at Stumble In going forward.
Well, the Stumble In version 2.0 is driven by the need to increase the amount of money that we can put against kids getting into nature. So up until this point, we established a really good relationship with the regional Northern Virginia 4-H Center right here in Front Royal, right. a magnificent campus right on the Appalachian Trail. And they provide for kids to attend 8-week-long summer camps every year. And they have to dip into their profit-making ventures to heavily subsidize these camps. And the true cost of one kid to go to a summer camp is about $400, which isn't that much when you consider that includes transportation to and from where they're from. And they're all in counties, most of which abut the Appalachian Trail. So, and not to digress, but the Appalachian Trail is beautiful as it is predominantly populated with a large amount of people who are very modest means. So the idea of spending $400 to send their kid to camp is foreign. It's quite foreign.
Sure.
So up until this point, we've been able to fund nearly 50 kids going to the camp, but that's only meeting about 15% of the true need.
Right.
And we knew that the model had to change because Stumble In, because of scale, is kind of capped at how much revenue we can make. Because as many hostels want to do, you don't want to gouge hikers. They're taking 4 to 6 months out of their lives where they're not making money to fulfill this lifelong dream for many of them. So you don't want to nickel and dime them, $5 for a pillow. Oh, you want sheets too? No, we didn't want to do that, right? And we've all experienced those hostels. Again, you learn the good, the bad, and the ugly at different hostels. And this is not to disparage any hostel, but that's not our business model. That's not what we wanted to do. So we're capped at that. So we needed to come up with something different, and we still wanted to be consistent with taking care of today's hikers. And what we found, predominantly through conversations with flip-floppers that come to the Stumble In early in the hiker season, because they pick Harper's Ferry as a good stepping off point and they head south. So we're catching them after their first weekish on the trail, and many of them are already thinking about getting off. And a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them want to get off because they haven't quite fine-tuned their approach to hiking on the trail, because some of them freely admit that the first time they put their tent up was their first night on the Appalachian Trail.
It was for me. It was for me when I did it.
and you can, and many can get right through that and rely upon the generosity of fellow hikers to kind of point them in the right direction. Hey, you might consider this, that, or the other. And it is my firm belief, doing some market research, that there is a huge population that wants to do what we have all done, but they just don't know how to take that first step.
Absolutely.
And that first step looks a whole lot like the Woods Hole weekend, where people come, spend some time learning about, backpacking 101, I've heard it called, and come out the other end confident in their gear and how to use it, confident in themselves that they can do it. And that's what we're targeting now, and that's where we're going to move toward in later 2025.
Well, I mentioned the other day when you talked about this, I feel this is such an inspiring thing to do. And I think I'm sure a lot of people out on the trail think, that would really suit me. And I said that I'd be happy to come along to one of these weekends and do my bit to offer advice and encouragement to hikers. How many do you think you're going to put on when you start them?
We want to scope it small. So, doing that market research, I found that a lot of the comments, mostly positive, about the experiences of, going through some sort of backpacking 101, is the amount of time they get to actually spend with somebody, a seasoned hiker. I dare say professional hiker, but a seasoned hiker that has made all the mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
And
I'm your man for that.
Yeah. I've made plenty of my own.
I resemble that remark.
I carried a full copy of Lord of the Rings for a full week on the Appalachian Trail. So don't throw stones, right?
Yeah, classic.
So I want to keep that ratio down to about 3-to-1 max. So I want to keep the clientele for each hiker weekend capped at 6, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's a very intimate environment where true learning can happen, where people can't hide, people feel that they're being attended to, they're being heard, and all of their questions are being answered. Cool. So when they leave here, they know that they've got great value for the money they spent to come here for a long weekend of Stumble In.
Nice. Real nice one. While we were talking the other day, I was listening to everything that you were saying, and I was wondering, a bit like, you remember the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? I was kind of wondering, and remember these guys were chasing Butch and Sundance. He said, who are those guys? And I'm thinking, who is this guy? So I'm going to ask you now, who are you? What's driving you on to do this? What's your motivation?
Well, I've always, since childhood, I've been very interested in what changes the trajectory in a kid's life. And oftentimes it's luck, it's bad luck, good luck. It's not necessarily, a where you landed. It's what you did and what's been done to you that can really make a difference in where you end up 10, 20, 30 years later. And I had a significant trauma when I was in my preteens, and I don't wear this as a badge because it's happened to so many kids, but I was molested by a man and a woman. And I remember just how that affected me and changed me as a person. And I don't have kids for that reason. And good, bad, or ugly, I don't know. I that was my decision. I still, though, have this, it's more than an urge. It's just like, it's what I think I need to do. And I think a lot of us want to do. And forgive me if it sounds like this is about me. It's not about me. It's about what one person can do, what you can do, what listeners to this podcast can do, which would be so effortless and possibly not as significant to them as they might at first realize. I mean, I point back to the 1 week camp, $400. Yeah, it's a good chunk of change.
Sure.
But that's a week where a kid gets to experience things that he or she may not have ever experienced. And it's almost as if it's giving them that manna that they can put in their pocket and they can pull out from time to time.
That's right.
To give them the energy through the hard times.
Hard times, yeah.
To give them the energy to resist temptation, to be attracted to a way of life more consistent with where they want to be. And I think the science is pretty much settled on the fact that, I'll plug this guy's book, Jonathan Haidt. He wrote a book called The Anxious Generation. And it talked about the detrimental effect of today's society, specifically screen time. And I'm not a troglodyte. I use my screen.
Yeah.
I wear that phone out every day.
Yeah.
But it has had a measurable negative influence on kids. And that's something that doesn't happen for that 1 week. And every kid that goes through the camp fills out an exit survey. And and one question is, hey, what did you get out of camp? And they come up with a lot of things. And I think I've shared this with you. If not,
you did.
Yeah, some of the quotes. These are from the mouths of kids from like 9 to 13 years old.
Sure.
Things like, I love the outdoors. I am less addicted to screens. I know that Vaseline can be used to light a fire. I can put up a big tent. I made new friends. I'm proud of my choices and feel good in a leadership position. I like hearing that, Steve. I really like hearing that because they don't have to lie on these surveys. They just get to write what they're kids.
Yeah.
And Art Linkletter was right. Kids will say the darndest thing.
That's right.
Most of it very true.
Yeah.
And I think more kids, the better, that get that kind of opportunity. And that's the motivation, Steve, in a nutshell.
Well, I admire you for that. I think we all see it, we all recognize it, and you're actually doing something about it. And I'm actually finally today, I'm going to take you back a few months when I first reached out to you. The subject that Sir McConish was talking about that day was the Sir McComics book that he had released to raise money for one of his local charities. You bought one, and you told me that you hadn't opened it, and you'd be prepared to offer it to the highest bidder on my show. Tell everybody about the book, and the money. People need to remember, whatever money is raised will go directly to the AT Kids Foundation. So tell us what the book is about.
So the book is a compilation of a year's worth of comics and the comics are political in nature. And I don't talk politics. We don't talk politics at Stumble In, but I enjoy Michael Smerconish,
Yes.
Mainly because about every couple of weeks he dips back into kids and what can we do for kids. So he came up with this idea. Hey, what if we had a coffee table book? And it turned out to be a 12 by 9 inch, 5-pound, 300-page hardbound. It's a beautiful book with all those comics in it. And these aren't just anybody's comics. These are Pulitzer Prize winning, very noted artists, editorialists, Steve Breen, Jack Oman, Rob Rogers, Scott Stantis, and maybe soon Ann Telnays, but they're very funny. And it doesn't matter where you land on the political spectrum, they're hilarious. And they made over $200,000, which was donated to the Children's Crisis Treatment Center. And so I called him, and I guess that's how you heard about me. I called to say, hey, I'm still waiting for my book, but let's do something. They only published 10,000 copies.
That's right.
They were all bought up right away.
I was so annoyed with myself for not buying one myself. I said, I'm gonna bid on this, by the way. Bid away.
Yeah. So I pitched the idea. Why don't we raffle this book off, or highest bidder, or whatever? And he said, well, if you do it, I'll have to do it for everybody. But why don't you try to link in with like-minded folks and let me know how it goes? And Steve, I'm not a deeply religious person, but you called me, and within 30 seconds of our conversation, I said, this is what we could do. And my book is not opened. It's still in the box addressed to me. It's in mint condition. And the book price is $50 plus $13 for shipping and handling. So I'm only $63 into it.
All right.
I've seen on eBay, these things are going for upwards $300-$400. And these are just people who just want the book. But what we could do is highest bidder gets the book, knowing that that bid isn't going to pay for David's next adventure. It's going straight into AT Kids Foundation. I can't touch a penny of it. I don't want to touch a penny of it. I don't need it. And, again, $400 a copy. The copy being every kid that gets to go to camp that wouldn't otherwise get that chance. So I'm absolutely thrilled with the idea that we might have somebody out there that really wants this book, couldn't get a copy because, again, they're not going to print anymore.
Yeah.
But they can get that copy now, and they know that the money, every penny of it, is going to go to AT Kids.
So we'll entertain bids on the book, and I'll announce the highest bid in, say, 2 weeks' time. Seems sensible. Maybe
Sounds
3.
Good to me.
2 or 3 weeks, and all the money will go to AT Kids. So I'm going to start bidding, by the way, at $100, but I know it will go higher than that, and I may even exceed that myself. But look, David, this has been such a wide-ranging interview, and you're doing some amazing things out there. And it's a shame I've never saw the Stumble In when it was operating as a hostel. But one day in the future, maybe I'll see it at some stage. But look, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your story. We'll stay in touch, and I can just wish you very, very best with both what your new purpose of Stumble In 2.0 is, and also obviously AT Kids Foundation. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate the time, and I just want to underscore one thing. Most of the money that's gone into AT Kids did not come from David and Danielle. It came from the unbelievable generosity of the hikers that we know and love.
Yes.
And from the bottom of my heart, anyone listening that has stayed at Stumble In, thank you so much.
Okay, man. Well, look, take it easy, and we'll talk again soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers then. Bye. So it started with an AT thru-hike, truncated for David by injury, and it took in a tragic illness which turned his life around and landed him in a hostel. All along, it was about the kids and the AT Kids Foundation. Now the hostel is being repurposed, and he'll be funding AT Kids with his hiking and backpacking classes. As I said, who is this guy? He was very honest about his trauma, even citing it as to why he doesn't want children himself, but it's his mission now to help all kids get into the outdoors and away from their screens. He is selfless and trying to do a lot of good in young people's lives. You cannot fault that. I absolutely kicked myself for not buying that book when it was announced on a Smerconish radio show, so I do want to kick off the bidding at $100. I hope that you would like to buy into not only the book, but also the idea of sending kids to camp. Over the next 2 weeks, maybe 3, I'd like you to send your bids to me at steve@hikingradionetwork.com, and I'll update the highest bid on both the Hiking Radio Network Facebook page and, of course, the podcast. But I'm also going to write back to you if you've got the highest bid and that bid has been exceeded. So if you want to go higher, you then can. You can't get the book anymore. The comics are hilarious, making fun of everything to do with the last election, so it's going to piss you off if you're a Democrat or a Republican. It will be a proud addition to anybody's home. Most important of all, of course, is that you'll be helping this great guy, David, to send a kid and kids to camp. Not a bad legacy, eh? My eternal thanks go again to this week's recurring donors to the show. They are Michael Garsh, Betty McInerney, Ann Pickin, Sharon James, Sean Deadwiley, Emmanuel Bravaramas, Kevin Weidman, Brian Alsop, Glenn Ferguson, and Emily's Escapade. Thank you guys so much. And something I wanted to mention last week, but forgot, was that my friend Rob Diamond is going to be doing the AT this year. He was one of the guys who came with me to Hot Springs a couple of months back after the hurricane. He was so inspired by my conversation with George Eschleman, keeper, that he wanted to honour service members and first responders in a similar fashion. Rob is going to be carrying dog tags with him. Like George, that is a hefty commitment, so I can only wish him well and wanted you to check out his YouTube page, which he's recently started. He is Dog Tag on the AT, and you can find it by searching YouTube or clicking the link that I'll add in the show notes. Better luck to you, Rob. Now, my own news. I've been getting itchy feet again recently, and I've decided to do something about it. As you know, I've done 2 Appalachian Trail thru hikes, and I'm not too sure I'd be up for another long hike like that, but I thought about it, and I've decided to head back to Spain to the Camino Francés and have another do-over. This time, I won't be hiking with my niece, Emma, and I intend to be rather less bougie than the 2 of us were back in 2018. As you know, I'll be following Beth and Dave on the AT, and our show will continue, but from Spain. Thought I'd let you all know. So that's plenty of me talking for this week. So we're going to finish off with Emily Leonard, still living the dream, as she heads through the zoo and reaches the Greymoor Monastery in New York. Once more, Bruce is the star of the show. I'll see you all next week. Chapter 22. Sometimes life just beats you down. I was blessed to be born with a can-do attitude, a driven personality, or whatever you want to call it. But at times it can really get in the way. The last 2 days, I put in long, exhausting hikes. Mentally, I felt great. Even with the miles of smiles, I was physically beat. The days I did low miles, I felt great physically, but I beat myself up mentally. I really wanted to be home by mid-August for Stephen's 21st birthday and for Patch's football season. Since I'd come to the realisation I couldn't keep doing high miles, I knew I wouldn't be home for either. I had a mental breakdown as Bruce was dropping me off at the trailhead. I bawled my eyes out, big, large crocodile tears with loud, snot-bubbling sobs. I was so upset and so tired of being in pain. As I walked away, tears flowed down my cheeks, blurring my vision, and all I could hear was, "I'm so proud of you. You're doing great." I hiked away in a flood of tears as my biggest cheerleader's voice faded with every step forward. I proceeded up the trail for a mild warm-up, a nice time of transition for my anguish to slowly drift away. Then the trail went straight up. More hand-over-hand climbs, which I love. Walking hurts my feet, but rock scrambling was pain-free due to the anatomical position used to make the climb. And those climbs were usually blessed with a view. The trail always seemed to give me what I needed when I needed it the most. As I hiked that day, I could feel the love and support that seemed to gush out from Bruce. It was so amazing how much closer we'd become while doing this hike together. It was like we were falling in love all over again. He would keep telling me, "It's your hike. Do what you want." But in reality, it was our hike. I may have been the one with boots on the ground, but he was the one that was making it possible in more ways than one. He was strong enough to know what I needed to hear. He knew I didn't want to quit, but he also knew that I was suffering dearly. He held strong and didn't let my tears and babbling words weaken his support. When I was letting life beat me down, he picked me back up and helped me toward my goal. Together, we hiked on that day. I was on the trail and he was in my heart, and I could feel his strength beating inside me. I finished the day with a whopping 12 miles added to the captain's log. No records there, but I was pain-free. I needed to stop beating myself up and get back to the reason I was out there. After all, my motto was happy hiking. The trail and my body had a conversation without inviting my prideful brain to join in. They decided my daily mileage needed to stay between 12 to 15 miles to keep me healthy. From that day on, I only had a handful of days when my miles stretched over 15, and most of those days the extra mileage could not have been avoided. Consequently, the last part of the hike was my most enjoyable. Some lessons take a while to learn. The days started flying by. No two were the same. Each one offered new surprises and escapades that were not for the faint of heart. I never knew exactly where I'd be, with whom, or what events would take place. I had a game plan, of course, but it was just that, a plan. Over the next several days, I took a trip to Boston for the night, had a close encounter with a deer, squeezed through the eye of a camel, left the trail to help a fellow hiker, lost my poles, and slept with a stranger. After our second night with Kilroy at Anton's on the Lake, we all realised we had 2 wonderful restful nights of sleep, but it was time to leave the comforts of plumbing and electricity and get back to the woods. Kilroy would be a day behind me. The day I headed out, full of tears, he was back at the motel for a zero of his own. We wished each other well and went our separate ways, headed north. I was in the woods by 6:45 a.m. and was thrown back into the trail full force, without the leisurely warm-up like the day before. The trail went straight up. I was headed to New York's famous lemon squeezer section. The trail sneaks through a narrow corridor of rocks that hikers must squeeze through. The rock hallway towered above an inclined path, so not only did I have to squish my way through the tight space, I had to climb upward. It was more fun than challenging. For the hiker who is more rotund, a blue blaze trail leads around the lemon squeezer. I lazily trod through the New York forest. The trees were incredibly tall and open, without any undergrowth. I felt so small and insignificant amongst the giant hardwoods. The day before had been so brutal that this day was so wonderful it felt like a dream. The deeper I trod into the forest, the more I sensed God's presence. I didn't have any aha moments, revelations or visions, but I did have a sense of peace. I let myself go, and as I did, I seemed to become one with the woods. I continued in that dreamlike state for so long I thought I was going to float away. All of a sudden, I was brought back to the trail with the sound of crashing and thrashing headed my way. I looked up just in time to see a deer dash across the trail a few feet ahead of me. I quickly hiked up to where she had disappeared to see if I could see why she was in such a hurry. Then there was more of the same ruckus, and I turned in the opposite direction to see a huge buck skidding to a halt about 20 feet from my position. I asked him if he wanted to get by. When I spoke, he redirected his course and flew off, taking a wide berth in hot pursuit of his girlfriend. That was exhilarating, to say the least. That kept my heart beating fast for a while. The day ended with another extraction by Bruce. This time we headed for Boston. Yep, I left the trail to drive all the way to Beantown with my hubby for the sole purpose of returning the rental car he had and getting another one. Our plan was to get a van so we could sleep in it whenever he would meet me instead of getting a hotel or hostel. We did some crazy stuff on the trail. Most people would not even consider doing half the stuff that we did. I never worried about the details. Bruce was the logistics guy. I just followed his lead and he made things happen. It was awesome how our dynamics worked like a charm. I hiked, requested, cried, ate and whined, and Bruce was my hero. He drove the miles, made reservations, dried my tears, filled my requests, ignored my whining, and even found time to work. Our little excursion turned out to be not such a good idea. There were no vans on Emerald Isle for us to choose. The best we could do was a Ford Explorer. After the swap, we drove as far as a service plaza on I-90 and converted the SUV into our double-occupancy hotel suite. We looked like a homeless couple, if you overlook the fact that we were in a fully loaded, sexy black Ford Explorer. If we had to be responsible for the payments, we probably would have been homeless. Have you ever checked out the sticker for one of those babies? We slept until 6 a.m. and I was back on the trail in New York by 10:30 a.m. I will admit the next day I was a lot grumpy. Actually, I was a brat. I was not very happy I'd chosen to ride to Boston, then had to sleep in the back of the small SUV instead of a van, and then be expected to hike the next day. I have no idea why I didn't just sleep on the trail like a real hiker. I may have thrown a small hissy fit. Praise the Lord. I ended up only hiking 4.3 easy miles that next day. I was aiming for 11.6. Despite the short and arduous escapade the night before, I was feeling strong, but I was more than happy to call it quits early. The hike up and down Bear Mountain was fun and comprised of mostly steps to make the venture enjoyable for touristy non-hikers. Even without a guidebook, I could tell when the trail was approaching a tourist attraction. The trail before and after such places was always well groomed and engineered for about a mile in each direction. The farther the path veered from a tourist epicentre, the more rustic and natural it became, until in places it hardly resembled a footpath at all. On my descent of the mountain, as I enjoyed the perfectly placed stone steps and views being offered, I stopped to take a snack break. The Trailside Museum and Zoo was only a mile away. That was where I was meeting Bruce again. We were going to walk through the zoo and across the Hudson River together, then I would continue on. Those plans changed when Why Not, a hiker I had met way back, contacted Bruce. Why Not was reaching out to trail angels he had met to see if anyone could assist him with a ride to the nearest REI store. His shoes blew out. So instead of me hiking on without knowing when they would get back from Yonkers, New York, I chose to end my day short and go with them. Obviously, I hadn't had enough punishment with my trip to Boston. Bruce collected me at Bear Mountain Recreation Center, and we headed out to provide trail magic for someone in need. Why Not wasn't too far behind me. We found him at a road crossing with two other hikes I knew, Bud and Bud Light, a couple from Germany who also needed a ride to town. We dropped the beers off first and delivered Why Not to his friend who would take him to REI. I decided to head back to the park and walk through the zoo and then across the Hudson to get a few more miles in before camping at the Graymore Spiritual Life Center in Garrison, New York. The center provides a field with a pavilion, power, shower and porta potty for hikers. Bruce dropped me off and he headed to the other side of the zoo to join me from the north as planned earlier. But those plans were foiled also. I got back to where I had left the trail that morning and that section of the AT was closed for the night due to a fireworks show at the park. The security guards said I needed to go around the building and pick up the trail on the other side. I tried to use my cunning charm, but that didn't work. Then I turned on the blondness, which was actually more of a platinum grey. Still didn't work. They wouldn't let me through. They insisted I go round. No, I can't do that. I have to follow the white blazes, I said. They thought I was nuts. The section I needed to do was less than 100 yards. Oh well, I would just start back tomorrow where I left off. There was no blue blazing for this black bear. We still were able to tent at Graymore. It wasn't far from Bear Mountain Recreation Area, and I was able to return early the next morning. I followed the lake through the park, then used the restrooms before continuing. I never passed up the opportunity to use plumbing. It was quiet in the park so early, I was glad the facilities were open for use. I reached the entrance to the zoo, and it was closed. Great! The night before, the white blazes were closed due to fireworks. Now the next morning, the white blazes through the zoo were not yet open. Kilroy was close by, so we sent him a text to see if he wanted to join us for breakfast. We headed over to his hotel, and he had decided to have the breakfast buffet there since it came with his room. I went to pay for breakfast for Bruce and me, but the lady at the counter let us eat for free. Sweet deal. It's a grand treat to encounter an all-you-can-eat buffet, and even better when it's compliments of a friendly hostess. With our tummies full, we headed back to the trail. If only my hands were full also. They were empty. They should have held my hiking poles. Not realising it, I'd left them in the bathroom earlier that morning. When my error dawned on me, we made an attempt to retrieve them, but they were gone. We checked at the lost and found building in the park, but no one had turned them in. That was one very expensive bathroom break. Bruce dropped off both Kilroy and I back to the recreation area, and I redid those blazes just to be able to stay with Kilroy. Then Bruce drove across the Hudson and walked back to meet us. It was a nice walk through the zoo. We learned an interesting AT fact from the guidebook as we strolled through the attraction. The bear enclosure is the official lowest point on the Appalachian Trail at only 124 feet elevation. The walk across the Hudson was amazing for me. I'd never before traversed such a large structure on foot. Kilroy was in the lead and Bruce had my back. I relished the wind in my face, the rush of the cars as they whizzed by, and the openness of the water as we left the safety of the shore. Rain was forecasted for that day. Every hiker we encountered had plans to cut it short for the day and to stay at Graymore. We also had plans for a second night on the grounds of the monastery. After crossing the Hudson, Bruce drove ahead to meet us there. A huge field accommodates tents, but with the forecasted weather, space in the pavilion would be limited. When the heavens opened, they spared no mercy. The rains drenched us. At least it wasn't cold, and we hiked on. With a half-mile to go, we followed the trail across the junction of US 9 and New York 403. Conveniently located in the Y of the intersection is a store with hot food. Kilroy and I were not going to pass up the chance to get grub and to get out of the weather. Several other hikers took refuge inside the store. There was a guy I had not yet met, 14. Kilroy knew him and did the introductions. The half-mile to Greymore was over in a flash. Bruce was waiting for us. It was raining hard and none of us were thrilled about tenting. Sleeping in the rain with the pitter-patter of droplets dancing off the tent's fly is quite enjoyable, but this was a downpour with the threat of another electrical storm. So Kilroy, 14, Bruce and I decided to split the cost of a room. The storm was driving hikers inside and we were in a tourist area. Vacancies were few and prices were at a premium. 14 found a place not too far away. We headed over to inspect. For a lack of a better description, it was a hole in the wall for a whopping price of $180 plus tax. Ouch! It had 2 double beds, dirty rugs and a tiny bath. One person would have had to sleep on the floor or the 2 guys would have had to bunk together. Bruce travels a lot and he knew a rip-off when he saw one, so he worked his magic and found a place for significantly less. The only problem was it was over an hour away, but it offered an oversized room with 2 double beds and a pull-out couch. The hotel had a hot tub and swimming pool, and because of Bruce's elite status with that chain, he had access to a club lounge with free food and beverages. We let 14 and Kilroy know what we found. Before Bruce could finish explaining all the amenities and the distance, they were all in, so off we went. My wonderful husband drove the 3 of us wet, smelly hikers to the lap of thru-hiker luxury. Once again my hero came through, and it didn't bother him one bit that we would be sharing a room with 2 other guys, one that we'd just met a few hours earlier. Bruce and I let the guys have the beds while we put the mattress from the pull-out on the floor and topped it with a cosy comforter we found in the closet. I was singing the Z's in no time. I slept straight through until morning, something I rarely do even on a good night. The rain stuck around longer than predicted. We didn't mind. The Sheraton was a wonderful place to enjoy an impromptu 0 day. 14 thought he had died and gone to heaven. He was fully enjoying all the amenities. He especially loved the free food in the club lounge. We all did. It was a free hiker supply. The room was large enough to give each of us our own uncrowded space to dry our soggy gear. If we desired even more room, we had the rest of the establishment to roam. I was quite content staying put. I soaked my feet, napped and repacked my gear after it dried. We were refreshed and ready to go. Bruce drove us back to the retreat centre where he had retrieved us. I had a 15-mile day planned and Kilroy was bumping his mileage up. He wanted to get his northern section done to finish his flip-flop in time for his ticket to St. Martin for a restful post-hike Caribbean getaway. Hiking with Kilroy had been a hoot. He was a gentle giant with a kind soul. We were an odd hiking pair. He was young, I was less young. He was tall, I was vertically challenged. He was quiet, he probably wished I was quiet. The one thing we had in common was our day's end music ritual. We loved our music to power us through the last 2 miles of a day. We summoned the help of Aerosmith, Asia, Black Sabbath, ELO and other artists I'd never heard of. Everyone I met on trail eventually hiked on and I fell behind. It no longer bothered me though. What I thought was a curse in the beginning became a blessing. My slower pace and the need to rest my aching feet caused me to fall into a variety of hiking bubbles. This was not a curse but rather a gift. I had the chance to encounter hikers of all ages, from all walks of life. Earlier, I would pray for my feet to be better, but those prayers were never answered. The song titled Unanswered Prayers by Garth Brooks held true here. I wanted healthy feet, but if they had been fit earlier on, I would not have gotten a chance to meet my favourite hiking buddy, Kilroy. It was a lesson I learned and relearned over and over again on the trail. Things would be okay, I should not fret, and I should just relax and enjoy the journey. After 1,400 miles, I was finally putting it all together and was at peace with whatever the trail offered me. I still wanted feet that didn't hurt, so on the first day of July, my 4th month on the trail, we headed to REI, an outdoor specialist store. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I wanted something. It was in Hartford, Connecticut. On the trail, I was still in New York, but New England was just next door. Rain was forecasted, so Bruce and I decided to head on over to the outfitter for some equipment adjustments. I knew I needed a new sleeping pad. The one I had was leaking. The pad I wanted was out of stock. They offered me a heavier one, but I decided to tough it out with my deflating pad. I would be in the White Mountains soon, and extra weight was not going with me. My new boots were helping some with my metatarsal pain, but the donut sore between my toes was not getting any better at all. As I was cruising the store to see what treasures I could find, I noticed toe socks. Andrew had worn toe socks, and he didn't get any blisters. I grabbed a couple of pairs of the Injinji brand, and we were off. I wasn't expecting any miracles from Injinji, I was doubtful such a simple little item could help the pain I'd been experiencing since week 1. But sometimes when life just beats you down, you finally decide to try something new.